Well, we were zeroing in on a ship, and they got us before we got them. You know, we had 2 bombs we could drop on a ship if we got right over it. We did that sort of thing my first 2 missions, dropping the bombs right on the ship, and we got back. But our squadron, the 500th Bomb Squadron of the 345th Bomb Group, was very unlucky. We lost a lot of planes. If you want to know the number, I've got the figure somewhere. It's just unbelievable during the whole war. It was a 5-man crew, the pilot and co-pilot. The engineer is right behind the pilot, and the navigator is right behind the co-pilot and has a little desk there. Then the tail gunner and radio operator is in the tail, and he has his own exit back there. We were bombing not only a ship out there, but the naval base there at Haikou, Haikou, the capital city of Hainan Island, in the northernmost city of Hainan Island. And then I think the Japanese guns that got us, they were from this naval base that we were bombing in Haikou. We were on fire, and you know it just could have blown up any time, and with all still had our bombs, it would have made quite an explosion. The pilot had been shot down once before, so he knew what he had to do. Of course, we were already down low, and he just said, well, now, you, the engineer, and you, the navigator, open up the hatch. You know, just swung open like that, just kind of a lid. Stand up in there, stood up to about here. And when I ditch the plane, that was the verb we used in those days, belly landed. When I belly land the plane on Hainan Strait, you get out as quickly as you can, and then the co-pilot and I will follow you out, because that's the only way out in the front. And then the tail gunner, radio operator, had his own hatch in the rear, and he had to operate that himself. Well, the engineer and I got out. I don't know exactly what happened, but the plane made a lurch to the left, and the hatch caught me right in the back. I was paralyzed for 1 hour after we got down in the water. By we, I mean the engineer and I. We got out, and my legs were paralyzed, so I had to swim to a tiny rubber raft that another plane dropped for us on the mission that day. They dropped their own raft, only one raft in each plane. And of course, if they'd been shot down, well, then they wouldn't have had a raft. So we really appreciated that. I had to swim about 50 yards with my arms alone to the raft, and the engineer was already in it, and he helped me in since my legs were useless. And he started rowing the raft with what came with it was about 1.5 feet long, almost useless, a little bitty blade, the paddle. But he started rowing it out toward the China Sea, and we knew from past experiences that if we could get out to the China Sea before we got captured, we had a good chance of being rescued by Americans in a PBY. I forget what PBY stands for, but it was an airplane that could land in the water, had pontoons. It was amphibious, yeah. Right. Might even been 4-engine, I'm not sure. I had a kit in my, a parachute kit in my tent in the Philippines where we were stationed. And one object in there was, of course, the parachute. But this satchel was very useful in a lot of ways. But we just left the parachute there, never bothered to take it aboard the ship, the airplane.
Now, the engineer was rowing and...
Yes, and then eventually in another little raft, the tail gunner came up, and there we were with 2 little rafts rowing along toward the open sea.
Pilot and co-pilot?
They didn't make it out of the plane. They at one point, the co-pilot did make it out of the plane, very briefly. He was about to dive down. You know, an airplane in those days, like a B-25, was built to come up to the surface but only for a very short time. And then it just noses down because the engines are up front. That's the heavy part. It just goes to the bottom. The pilot never made it out and went to the bottom definitely. The co-pilot in the last minute, though he was injured rather badly, I would gather, came out, sat on the wing, and he was very empty-headed. And we said, be sure and jump off right now because the plane's about to go down. Well, he did, just barely in time, so he didn't go down with the plane the way the pilot did. But then he did something crazy. He got out his pistol and started firing it up in the air. And I still don't know what he thought, if he was thinking. I guess the current was taking him away from us, the wrong direction, not toward the China Sea, but toward the Japanese. And we kept telling him, oh, inflate your west and start swimming to one of these two rafts. And we felt very badly when we heard the sixth and last shot. He was out of sight. So that was the end of that. And since we never saw him later as a fellow prisoner, we presumed that he drowned.
Now, did the Japanese then come out to find you?
Yes, they came out in a small ship that had two levels, and on the top level there was a Japanese with a machine gun trained right down on us. The tail gunner, Ben Muller, caused my first laugh. Even in circumstances like that, you laugh. He held up his hands when the Japanese said, hold up your hands. But he had his gun in his hand, his right hand. And, he could have pointed it toward them. And I was amazed that this gunner laughed. In addition to my laughing, he laughed because it was such a silly thing. He should have just thrown the gun away. They helped us up into the ship and took us prisoner into Haikou, each of us in a separate cell, every other cell, so we couldn't talk to each other. And we knew that some of them had been shot right away, left dead there in the water. We never met any, and I have never met any prisoners from the 345th Bomb Group. I don't think any of them made it back, but us. We were right there at Hainan, just off the coast in Hainan Strait. They just turned the boat around, went back to Haikou, and put us in these cells. Mine was, each cell was about 2.5 feet wide and 4 feet long. Just short enough so that you couldn't lie down at night. I think that was the idea. Part of the punishment, as one of the guards told us in his broken English, part of the punishment was not much food. So we had a rice ball about the size of a baseball once a day. Now, they did give us water, though, that had been boiled. And do you remember those little Coca-Cola bottles that were so thick that if you dropped one in, it wouldn't break? They had them, and they gave each of us one a day. Now, I think that was about, 5 or 6 ounces, that little Coke bottle. So we had one bottle of water, and on most days, just one rice ball. And then I'll never forget one occasion. The assistant commander of the base of this POW place invited me to his room for a meal. And he invited me to sit down in front of his desk. But I couldn't sit down because when the plane was on fire, my legs were burned very badly, including my buttocks. I couldn't sit down. So I got down on my knees in front of his desk, and he gave me a little of each thing he was eating, and that's when I realized what fantastic food they were getting, these officers, especially the second in command. April the 3rd, 1945, 5 months and 1 week until August the 10th. We were not weighed until we had been a prisoner in their hospital after the war was over. See, after the war was over, we were still very fearful that the Japanese would kill us, any time, before they themselves were taken prisoners. Just before the Japanese, before the Americans landed to rescue us, just 9 Americans came in. Can you believe that? They parachuted in, took over the whole island. I guessed that it was either down to 100 or maybe 110 at the most.
Had you weighed before that?
We weren't in any hospital until 10 days before we were liberated. And then a colonel, I never will forget his name, Miao, M-I-Y-A-O. And we pronounced it meow like a cat, you know. But he was awfully good to us. And I suppose we ate 5, 6 meals a day and drank more. What is that drink? They drank sake than we should have.
Rice
wine. Right. They warmed it up for us even. And so I was terribly sick from eating too much and drinking too much sake. But on the whole, I think it really helped a good deal because within the 10-day period, I had gained, I weighed 120 some.